If you've been on TikTok the past few days, weeks, you've seen it. Cool footage, looks like a Hollywood movie kind of thing. Soundtrack, fast cuts, vibe. 40 million people watched it before asking, what actually was that? Well, Safari Cup and welcome to another episode here for the Fun Report Mindful Media and Communication. And what that was probably a video from the Pentagon, because the Pentagon is leaning heavily into the TikTokification, social mediaification of its war. Not that it's anything completely new. Of course, government's always been using social media, the internet for war propaganda and so on. And not saying the Pentagon is the only ones doing it, of course. Both sides are doing it. But do we really care about Iranian memes is the question. So when the Pentagon then releases Iran strike footage, edited, scored, cut like an action trailer, that's a little bit different. And when the Secretary of War posted to X with a caption that reads like it's from a gaming channel and 40 million people or 40 million impressions within 24 hours, or whatever the metric was, is what it racks up, then we gotta ask some questions. And yeah, I think this is more like a content drop, what we've seen from the Pentagon, not a press release. And that heavy focus on generating cool, engaging content is what worries me a little bit and what I think we should talk about from a communications point of view. So what actually happened and what is it, right? So as always, here on the pod, I'll bring you a few communication theories, media studies theories, maybe even. I know, some scholars out there are like, communication theory and media theory is different. Yes, but for the sake of explaining what's happening, I think we can look into like both ways. Okay, let's not try to be an academic stickler. Let's try to, make sense of the world around us. Okay, so I think one of the main theories that I discuss in some of my classes as well right now is an old one from, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 67, guy Debord. He talks about the society of the spectacle. Okay, so he says modern life, the way we experience it, and he said it in the 60s, 70s. So he says modern life has been replaced by the representation of modern life. So the image of life, that's how we call it, becomes more real than the life itself. Back in the 70s, that was television, right? So what you see on TV, how life should look like, becomes more real to you than life itself. And hence, you base your decisions, how you interpret life on what you see on TV. Now, it's an old theory from the 70s, but as I explain it, you can probably see, wow, this thing actually applies to 2026 probably way more than back in the 70s. Because we see so many more images. And images doesn't mean just a picture, it means like videos, text, AI generated, whatever it might be. You go from music to videos to voice to anything. So most of the content we see is altered. We know that, right? It's made look nicer, better, different, whatever that might be. So then this altered content is actually what we consume and what to us replaces life itself. Now, that doesn't mean that we just stay inside and don't go out. That's not the case, okay? It's not like this only happens to those who never go out. No. You go out, you're on your phone, you're checking TikTok, IG, whatever that might be, and you're like, hey, this looks cool. If I go train Muay Thai 5 times a week, and I look at my Muay Thai feed, and I'm like, damn, that's what they do. Wow, that's how I should be doing that too. That is also part of it. Okay, so it doesn't just mean we just live in a fictional world. It does not. We live in the real world, but what we think we should be doing, how life should look like, what we think is real and what is not, is been replaced by what we consume. Okay, so the image, and that's just the overall catch-all term for any content, the image replaces life itself. Okay, so that's the society of the spectacle. Now we, the society, enjoys, lives for the spectacle that we can consume without actually doing it ourselves. Okay. This also leads me to the next point, right? So the war itself does not have to be going well for it to perform well on social media. The content needs to perform well. That's two completely separate metrics. Now, IG, Facebook, if you're still on there, X, you name it, TikTok does not care about whether or not you're winning the war and what's happening in the war. It cares about the engagement metrics. So if you drop a cool, highlight reel, fast cuts, motivational background music, and so on, then that gets engagement. And that's going well for you, even if the war might not. And living in a country where fuel is getting shorter and shorter, and I can tell you it's not going well. Just to put that out there, but not a political podcast. So, okay, that's the second one. This leads me then to another example and slash theory. We call it information dominance. Okay, so information dominance basically means that you control how something, an event, is being perceived. So it's not just about what actually happens. And if you're as old as I am, you remember the news at least kinda showed you what was actually happening. But right now, it's not about what's happening. It's about control the narrative. How are things being perceived? And the more we're getting into, those fights between like my team versus your team, left versus right. It's not even, the West versus Iran or whatever. It's like Democrats versus Republicans, all those things, right? And that's just as examples, okay? I'm not taking any sides here. But the more we divide it into teams, the less we care about what's real. And the easier it is using information dominance to make us root for someone. Okay, so in 2026, if you speak natively social media, you can control the narrative to a certain extent. You can control what people hear, see, and eventually believe. And again, the US is doing it, Iran is doing it, everybody's doing it. I'm just taking this as an example now because I think it's alarming to see that governments focus on that now. And yeah, again, information dominance means that we dominate, decide what you get to see, what you get to hear about. That does not need to be censorship, by the way. I can dominate information without censoring, because censorship, bad, right? If someone would censor us, we would be like, hey, yeah, we would be against it. But if you overwhelm us with information and just drown everything else out, that's no censorship. Huh. Yeah, so that's a one way to dominate information infrastructure. Okay. And if you do this natively, like in native social media terms, slangs, could now show my age in memes. That's how I would have done it back in the day. Yeah, but if you do this using a language that translates well onto social media, then you're trending, the other stuff is not trending, and so we only see what you want us to see. Smart play, ethically, gray zone, because I mean you're not doing anything illegal, but I mean besides the war. But other than that, ah, and for those who now go towards saying this sounds like propaganda. Yeah, kind of, but also not. Because propaganda, would have asked you back in the day, and I'm German, so I can tell you exactly how that worked, because I studied the Frankfurt School and things like this, not of what you were thinking. So propaganda, right? Asks you is nicely said, way too nice. Asks you to believe something, tells you to believe something. Okay? This right now doesn't ask you to believe it. It asks you to share it. It asks you to engage with it. It's not persuasion, it's sharing. And if you share, and if lots of people share it, it bypasses verification. So it doesn't matter if it's true. And so it doesn't ask you to believe that it's true. It asks you to share, to engage with it. And the more people share and engage with it, the more it will appear in other feeds, right? The algorithm likes it, pushes it up. So you're bypassing verification, and then it's too late. And once it's viral, does it need to be true? Millions of people will have seen it. Okay, so that's the theory lens for this episode. Now, can we see a pattern? Well, yes, we can. And let me explain just a little bit of the pattern, okay? So the first big war that was being covered on television was the Vietnam War. Yeah. And that sustained casualty coverage back in the day that turned public opinion. People that are aware of the Vietnam War and how it turned out know what happened. For those who not, check it out, right? So the government eventually noticed that war coverage could influence opinions, and the opinion, especially by the American people back then, was very strong against the Vietnam War. Yeah, so the government noticed that and was like, hey, oh wow, we gotta figure out how to control that or guide or lead that narrative a little bit better. And that happened later on, right? If we go back to the 90s, to the Gulf War, okay? In the Gulf War, then the government would have embedded journalists, would like have press pools, would, manage access. So to basically control and decide who gets access to which information. And then they wouldn't tell them write this, but they would try to structure what they can use to tell their stories. Okay. There's a famous another famous and I didn't want to overwhelm you with theories, but there's another famous scholar, Sean Baudrillard, and back then it was like very famously said that the Gulf War did not take place. So this basically suggested that the actual war is something that we didn't even see because we only saw the media image of the war. Okay, so one more time, basically similar to what I said earlier. So it says the media image replaced the actual war that was happening, but we as the audience, we only saw those media images. We only saw those late night strikes, and it felt a little bit like watching a movie. It felt a little bit like you're watching like Three Kings, for example, right? So that's why Baudrillard would suggest that the Gulf War did not take place because we haven't seen any raw footage, anything unedited. We only got the edited, cleaned up version of it. What they want us to see. And if you see this over and over again, eventually it's in your mind, in your consciousness, and it defines how you feel, believe, and how you perceive the war. And so fast forward now to 2026. Yeah, the government now doesn't manage journalists anymore, okay? The government doesn't do that anymore. Great. It publishes directly, though. So it bypasses the journalists and it publishes content in a format that people already are used to, that people are already consuming. So you don't need the journalists because who still watches the news? And who still every former journalist now is a podcaster, for example, right? Hey, I'm on podcasting, doing my own podcast. So the press as a middleman has been cut out. The government just keeps dropping bombs on social media. As you, I hope I made this clear enough, because sometimes the jumps are very fast. But from one more, wrapping it up from checking in the beginning, yeah, the Vietnam War being covered by the press influenced people's minds, so the government learns from it, then restricts who gets access, picks like the who gets into the press pool, and so on, to now ignoring the middleman, the journalists, and dropping bombs by themselves, social media bombs by themselves. So now, what does it mean that the propaganda basically has to or has learned to speak our language, the language and the voice that you enjoy? And you scroll past like government produced drops, action trailers, thinking that's wild, and you've already clicked share before you even thought about it. And those 3 seconds that we have to unshare it again, and no one, yeah, takes the time or thinks about it twice. That's not manipulation in the old way, right? It's not like how we used to manipulate it. That's something new. It's like just triggering your response. And again, you might just share it because you think that's wild, not because you're endorsing it. But how often do we share things that we don't endorse? How often do we interact, stay on things that we don't endorse? That's also engagement. And the more we do that, the more it gets shown. And that's how the circle starts. Now, the question, of course, at the very end is, what can we do? Can we ignore everything? Should we ignore everything? Probably not. But just mindlessly sharing? Probably also not. There must be a middle way, right? And from a, old person's point of view, yelling at the clouds, I would say we need to get the government back to actually letting journalists do the work. But then again, can you trust journalists? Or are they only trying to appease the government so that they get more access to content and then they can drop their own bombs? Wow, that went down real fast in those last 15 minutes. I'd be curious to hear what you think. How do you feel about that? Do you think, well, at least I hear it from the source, even though, it's edited, cut, and so on? Do you miss the old days? Or do you say, well, everybody's their own algorithms tailor, say we say it like this, and it's up to you whether or not you follow those things. One thing I think that we hopefully agree on is that being mindful while consuming media right now is more important than ever. And chances are that if you're listening or watching this podcast, you probably are very mindful of it. But maybe that's also one thing that we can not teach, because no one listens to teachers, but that we can, I don't know, share with our friends, family, and so on, to just be mindful about what we are consuming. That's it for this episode. Let me know what you think about this whole war on social media, dropping bombs on TikTok and so on. Shout out in the comments. That would be nice to hear. Otherwise, FunkyPod is everywhere on socials. funkypod@gmail.com if you want to write something. I'm looking forward to also reading things, of course, written by yourself. Until then, stay safe, take care, and we talk soon. สวัสดีครับ